Emma Carter had always believed that family was the one thing in life that could never betray her. Growing up in a quiet town, she was taught that parents were supposed to protect their children, guide them through difficult times, and put their happiness above everything else. Her mother, Diane, often spoke about the importance of trust, while her father, Robert, constantly reminded her that family should always come first. Emma carried those lessons with her throughout her childhood and into adulthood. She never imagined that the very people who taught her those values would one day become the reason she questioned everything she believed. The person Emma loved most in the world was her grandfather, William Carter. He was kind, patient, and wise. While her parents were often busy chasing careers and social status, her grandfather always made time for her. Every weekend she visited his old farmhouse on the edge of town. The property had been in the Carter family for generations. It wasn't just land, it was a symbol of family history. The farmhouse stood proudly among acres of fertile fields, and every corner of the property carried memories. Emma spent countless afternoons helping her grandfather plant flowers, repair fences, and listen to stories about their ancestors. As she grew older, their bond only became stronger. When William's health began to decline, Emma was the one who stayed by his side. She drove him to doctor appointments, prepared his meals, cleaned his house, and kept him company during long evenings. While her parents visited occasionally, they rarely stayed long. They always seemed too busy with work, parties, vacations, or helping Emma's younger brother, Jason, pursue one business idea after another. William noticed everything. He saw who showed up when things were easy and who stayed when things became difficult. One afternoon, as they sat on the farmhouse porch watching the sunset, William looked at Emma with a serious expression. "You've always had a good heart," he said softly. "Never let anyone take advantage of that." Emma smiled and squeezed his hand. "I won't, Grandpa." He nodded but looked troubled, as though there was something else he wanted to say. Before he could continue, a coughing fit interrupted him. Emma helped him inside, and the conversation was never finished. Months later, William passed away peacefully in his sleep. The loss shattered Emma. The funeral brought relatives from across the country. Everyone spoke about William's generosity and wisdom. Emma stood beside his casket fighting back tears, feeling as though a part of her life had disappeared forever. After the funeral, the family gathered at a lawyer's office for the reading of the will. Emma felt nervous but expected nothing more than a few personal belongings. To her surprise, the lawyer announced that William had left the farmhouse and the surrounding land to her. The room immediately fell silent. Emma looked around and noticed the shocked expressions on her relatives' faces. Her parents exchanged a quick glance before forcing smiles. Jason looked particularly unhappy. The lawyer explained that William had specifically chosen Emma because of her dedication and care during his final years. Emma felt overwhelmed. The property was worth a significant amount of money, but more importantly, it held emotional value beyond measure. It represented every memory she shared with her grandfather. After the meeting, her parents congratulated her. Robert placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Your grandfather knew how much you loved that place." Diane smiled warmly. "We're proud of you." Their words seemed sincere, and Emma had no reason to doubt them. At the time, she was only 23 years old and still building her career. She worked long hours and had little experience managing property. Her parents suggested that they help oversee the inheritance until she was more financially established. "It's a big responsibility," Robert explained. "There are taxes, maintenance costs, legal paperwork. Let us handle everything for now." Emma trusted them completely. Why wouldn't she? They were her parents. She signed a few documents they presented and allowed them to manage the property. Life moved on. Emma focused on work while her parents occasionally updated her about the farmhouse. Whenever she asked how things were going, they assured her everything was under control. Years passed. Emma built a successful career and became financially independent. She often thought about restoring the farmhouse someday and perhaps even living there. Whenever she mentioned the idea, her parents would change the subject or claim it wasn't the right time. Emma found it strange but never pushed too hard. She assumed they knew more about property management than she did. Meanwhile, Jason seemed to be living an increasingly luxurious lifestyle despite the fact that his business ventures rarely succeeded. He drove expensive cars, traveled frequently, and moved into a large home. Emma occasionally wondered where all the money came from, but her parents always praised Jason's entrepreneurial spirit and insisted he was doing well. One evening, several years after her grandfather's death, Emma attended a family dinner at her parents' house. The atmosphere felt normal at first. They laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed a meal together. During dessert, Jason received a phone call and stepped outside. A few minutes later, Robert followed him. Emma didn't think much of it until she went to the kitchen for a glass of water and accidentally overheard part of their conversation through the open window. "The land sale saved us," Jason said quietly. "Without that money, none of this would have happened." Robert replied, "Keep your voice down, Emma can't ever find out." Emma froze, her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure she had heard correctly. Land sale? What land sale? Her grandfather's property suddenly came to mind. Before she could hear more, the men noticed her movement near the window and quickly ended the conversation. When they returned inside, both looked nervous. Emma asked casually, "What land sale were you talking about?" Robert laughed too quickly. "Just an old investment." Jason avoided eye contact. Something felt wrong. That night Emma couldn't sleep. The conversation kept replaying in her mind. The next morning she searched through old emails and documents related to her inheritance. Surprisingly, she found very little information. Most records seemed to be controlled by her parents. Feeling uneasy, she contacted the county records office and requested information about the farmhouse. Days later, she received documents that changed everything. According to public records, the property had been sold nearly 4 years earlier. Emma stared at the paperwork in disbelief. She checked the address again and again, hoping there had been a mistake. There wasn't. The farmhouse and all the surrounding land had been transferred to a development company. The sale price was enormous. Emma's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. She had never approved any sale. No one had informed her. No money had ever reached her accounts. Her stomach tightened as realization slowly settled in. The property her grandfather had trusted her with was gone. Emma immediately drove to the location. As she approached, her heart broke. The beautiful farmhouse was gone. In its place stood construction equipment and rows of newly built homes. The fields where she and her grandfather had planted flowers had disappeared beneath concrete roads. Tears filled her eyes. It felt as though someone had erased a part of her life. She sat in her car for nearly an hour, unable to move. Every memory she cherished seemed buried beneath the development. The betrayal cut deeper than the loss itself. Someone had taken her inheritance without her knowledge. Deep down, she already feared she knew who was responsible. That evening she confronted her parents. She placed the county records on the dining room table and demanded an explanation. The color drained from Diane's face. Robert stared silently at the papers. For several seconds nobody spoke. Finally, Robert sighed heavily. "We were going to tell you eventually." Emma felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "Tell me what?" she asked, her voice shaking. Diane stepped forward. "The property was becoming a burden. We thought selling it was the best decision." Emma could barely believe what she was hearing. "You thought selling my inheritance was the best decision?" Robert raised his voice. "We did what was necessary for the family." The family. Those words echoed painfully in Emma's mind. She looked from one parent to the other, searching for some sign of regret. Instead, she saw defensiveness. Jason entered the room and immediately understood what was happening. He looked annoyed rather than ashamed. Emma felt tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this?" she whispered. No one answered. In that moment, the trust she had carried her entire life began to crumble. The people she loved most had hidden a life-changing secret from her for years. Worse still, they seemed convinced they had done nothing wrong. As Emma stood there staring at the family she thought she knew, she realized that the truth was far bigger than a simple property sale. There were missing answers, hidden motives, and secrets buried beneath years of lies. For the first time in her life, she no longer saw her parents as protectors. She saw them as strangers. And deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of a betrayal that would change her life forever. The silence in the dining room felt heavier than any argument Emma had ever experienced. Her parents stared at the documents spread across the table, while Jason avoided looking at anyone. For several long seconds nobody spoke. Emma's heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She had arrived hoping there would be some misunderstanding, some reasonable explanation that would make everything make sense. Instead, the guilty expressions on their faces told her the truth before a single word was spoken. Finally, her father leaned back in his chair and released a long sigh. "Emma, sit down," he said quietly. The calmness in his voice only made her angrier. "I don't want to sit down," she replied. "I want answers." Her mother stepped forward with tears already forming in her eyes. "It's not as simple as you think." Emma laughed bitterly. "Then explain it to me. Explain how my inheritance was sold without my knowledge." Diane looked toward Robert as though hoping he would take control of the situation. After a moment he cleared his throat. The property was becoming difficult to maintain. There were taxes, repairs, legal complications. "We made a decision that we believed was best for everyone." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "For everyone, you sold something Grandpa left to me." Robert rubbed his forehead. "We were trying to protect the family." Those words immediately made Emma furious. Protect the family from what? She demanded. Jason suddenly stood up. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? He snapped. Emma turned toward him. A big deal? Grandpa left that property to me, it was mine. Jason crossed his arms. It's not like you were using it. The statement hit her like a slap. That doesn't matter, she replied. It still belonged to me. Diane stepped between them. Please stop fighting. But Emma was no longer interested in keeping the peace. For years she had trusted these people without question. Now she needed the truth. How much was the property sold for? She asked. No one answered immediately. Robert finally named an amount. Emma nearly lost her balance. The figure was far larger than she expected. It represented years of financial security, opportunities, and dreams, yet she had never received a single dollar. Where did the money go? She whispered. Again, silence filled the room. Then Emma noticed Jason's expensive watch, his designer clothes, and the luxury car parked outside. Suddenly everything began making sense. You gave it to him, didn't you? She asked. Jason's face hardened. Robert immediately replied, some of the money helped Jason start his businesses. Some, Emma repeated. How much is some? No answer came. That was answer enough. Tears filled Emma's eyes. The betrayal felt even deeper now. Her grandfather had entrusted his legacy to her and her parents had taken it away to fund Jason's dreams. You stole from me, she said quietly. Diane began crying. Don't say that. What else should I call it? Emma asked. You sold my inheritance without telling me and spent the money. Robert's patience finally broke. Enough, everything we did was for this family. Jason needed support. Emma could hardly believe what she was hearing. And what about me? She asked. Didn't I matter? Nobody answered. That silence hurt more than any words ever could. Emma left the house shortly afterward. As she drove home, tears blurred her vision. She pulled over several times because she could barely see the road. The pain was overwhelming. She wasn't grieving the property anymore. She was grieving the family she thought she had. For days she barely slept. Every memory from her childhood suddenly felt different. She began questioning everything. Had her parents always favored Jason? Had she simply refused to see it? The more she thought about it, the more examples came rushing back. Jason was always forgiven for mistakes. Jason always received financial help. Jason always came first. Emma had spent years convincing herself that it wasn't favoritism. Now she wasn't so sure. Determined to learn the full truth, she began investigating. She requested additional county records, financial documents, and public filings. The more information she uncovered, the worse things became. The property sale had been completed quickly and quietly. Several signatures appeared on documents associated with the transaction. One signature was supposedly hers. When Emma saw it, her stomach dropped. It looked similar to her handwriting but wasn't hers. Someone had signed her name. The realization made her physically sick. What she originally believed was a betrayal was beginning to look like fraud. Emma immediately contacted the law firm that handled the sale. At first they refused to discuss details. However, after she provided proof that she was the original beneficiary, they agreed to release limited information. The documents revealed that her parents had represented themselves as acting with her approval. Emma stared at the paperwork for nearly an hour. Every page exposed another lie. Her trust in her family shattered further with each discovery. Weeks passed as Emma continued gathering evidence. During that time, her parents repeatedly called and texted her. Sometimes they apologized. Other times they accused her of overreacting. Jason mostly sent angry messages blaming her for creating conflict. Emma ignored them all. She needed facts, not excuses. One afternoon she attended a family gathering at her aunt's house. She hadn't planned to discuss the inheritance, but word had already spread. Several relatives approached her with awkward expressions. Some offered sympathy while others seemed uncomfortable. Eventually Emma decided to ask a direct question. Did anyone know the property was sold? She asked. The room became silent. People exchanged nervous glances. Her aunt looked down at the floor. Her uncle suddenly became interested in his drink. The reaction told Emma everything. They knew, maybe not every detail, but enough. You all knew, she asked quietly. No one answered. Finally, her aunt spoke. We didn't think it was our place to get involved. Emma felt another wave of heartbreak. The people she considered family had watched the situation unfold and chosen silence. You knew Grandpa left it to me, she said. Her aunt nodded sadly. Yes, and you knew it was sold. Another reluctant nod. Emma felt tears forming again. Why didn't anyone tell me? Her aunt's eyes filled with guilt. Your parents said you agreed. Emma laughed bitterly. Did that sound like something I would do? Nobody answered. Emma left the gathering feeling more alone than ever. The betrayal extended far beyond her parents. It seemed everyone had chosen comfort over honesty. One evening, while sorting through old boxes of her grandfather's belongings, Emma discovered a small notebook she had never seen before. Most of the pages contained simple notes about farming, weather conditions, and daily activities. However, near the back she found several entries that caught her attention. In them, William expressed concerns about family tensions. He mentioned worries about money and disagreements involving Jason. One sentence stood out above all others. "I trust Emma to protect what matters. I only hope others respect my wishes." Emma read those words repeatedly. It felt as though her grandfather was speaking directly to her. For the first time since discovering the truth, she felt a small spark of determination replacing her grief. A few days later she decided to visit the attorney who had handled William's estate. The original lawyer had retired, but she was directed to an elderly colleague named Harold Bennett who had worked alongside him for decades. Harold welcomed her warmly into his office. He remembered William well. After listening carefully to Emma's story, he became unusually serious. "Your grandfather loved you very much," Harold said. Emma smiled sadly. "I know," Harold nodded. "There are some things you should know." He walked toward an old filing cabinet and began searching through records. After several minutes, he removed a thick folder covered in dust. "William wasn't a foolish man," Harold continued. "He understood family dynamics better than most people realized." Emma listened carefully. Harold opened the folder and reviewed several papers. His expression suggested he had discovered something important. Before he passed away, William expressed concerns about what might happen after his death, Harold explained. Emma felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of concerns?" Harold hesitated. "Concerns about whether his wishes would be respected." The room suddenly felt very quiet. Emma leaned forward in her chair. "What are you saying?" Harold studied her face for a moment. "I'm saying your grandfather may have anticipated problems." Emma's heart raced. For the first time since the betrayal began, she sensed there might be more to the story, something her parents didn't know, something hidden. Harold carefully closed the folder and looked directly at her. "There may be another document." Emma's eyes widened. "Another document," Harold nodded slowly. "A document your grandfather instructed us to protect until it became necessary." Emma could barely breathe. "What does it say?" Harold smiled faintly. "I don't know yet. It's stored in a secure archive. We would need to retrieve it." Hope flickered inside her chest for the first time in months. After everything she had lost, after every lie and betrayal, there might still be something her grandfather left behind, something important, something powerful enough to change everything. As Emma left Harold's office that afternoon, she looked up at the sky and thought about her grandfather. For the first time since discovering the sale, she didn't feel helpless. She felt determined. The truth was finally beginning to emerge, and somewhere in the shadows of the past, William Carter had left behind one final secret waiting to be uncovered. Emma barely slept after leaving Harold Bennett's office. For weeks she had been drowning in anger, grief, and disappointment, but now something new had entered her heart: hope. The possibility that her grandfather had left behind another document changed everything. She spent the entire night thinking about what it could be. Maybe it was a letter. Maybe it was evidence. Maybe it was nothing important at all. Yet deep down she felt certain William would never have mentioned protecting a document unless it carried significant meaning. The next morning she called Harold before his office even opened. He answered with a soft laugh. "I had a feeling you'd call early." Emma apologized for her impatience, but Harold understood. He explained that retrieving the archived document could take several days because it was stored in a secure legal records facility. Those days felt longer than any Emma had ever experienced. She continued going to work, but her mind remained fixed on the mystery. Every time her phone rang, she hoped it was Harold. Meanwhile, her parents continued trying to contact her. Sometimes Diane left emotional voice messages begging her to forgive them. Other times Robert insisted they should settle the matter privately. Jason's messages remained angry and defensive. Emma ignored them all. She had spent enough time listening to excuses. Now she wanted facts. 4 days later, Harold finally called. The moment Emma saw his name on her screen, her heart nearly stopped. "We found it," he said. Emma immediately left work and drove to his office. The entire journey felt unreal. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. By the time she arrived, she could barely sit still. Harold greeted her and led her into a private conference room. On the table sat a large sealed envelope. The paper looked old, and across the front was written a message in William's handwriting. Emma recognized it instantly. Tears filled her eyes before she even opened it. Seeing her grandfather's writing again felt like hearing his voice after years of silence. Harold gently pushed the envelope toward her. "Your grandfather instructed that this remain sealed unless questions arose regarding the inheritance." Emma stared at the envelope for several seconds before carefully opening it. Inside were several documents and a handwritten letter. She unfolded the letter first. The moment she began reading, tears rolled down her cheeks. William wrote that if she was reading the letter, it meant his fears had likely come true. He explained that he loved his family but worried that money could lead some people to make selfish decisions. He wrote that Emma had earned his trust through kindness, loyalty, and integrity. Then came the sentence that changed everything. William explained that he had created an additional legal protection for the property. According to his instructions, the inheritance could not legally be sold without Emma's direct written approval after reaching a specific age. Any attempt to transfer ownership before that condition was met would violate the terms he established. Emma immediately looked toward Harold. "What does this mean?" she asked. Harold carefully reviewed the attached documents. His expression grew more serious with every page. Finally, he looked up. "It means your grandfather anticipated the possibility of interference." Emma felt her pulse racing. "And the sale?" Harold leaned back in his chair. "If these documents are valid, and they appear to be, the sale may never have been legal." For several moments Emma could not speak. The room seemed to spin around her. For months she had believed everything was lost forever. Now she was learning that the transaction which stole her inheritance might be invalid. More importantly, there was now written proof that William specifically intended to protect her rights. Harold recommended speaking with an experienced litigation attorney immediately. Within days, Emma met with a legal team specializing in estate fraud and property disputes. They reviewed every document she had gathered, including the newly discovered papers. Their reaction was immediate. The attorneys believed she had a strong case. One lawyer named Rebecca explained the situation clearly. "Your grandfather's documents create serious legal problems for the people involved in this sale. Combined with the suspicious signatures and financial records, there may be grounds for a lawsuit." Emma felt both relieved and terrified. Taking legal action against her own parents was something she never imagined doing, yet they had left her little choice. They had ignored her grandfather's wishes, hidden the truth for years, and treated her inheritance as their personal bank account. The lawsuit was filed several weeks later. News spread quickly throughout the family. Some relatives expressed support while others accused Emma of destroying family unity. She found the criticism almost laughable. The family had already been destroyed the moment her parents chose greed over honesty. Her lawsuit simply exposed the damage. When Robert received notice of the case, he immediately called her. For the first time, Emma answered. "How could you do this?" he demanded. Emma remained calm. "I could ask you the same question." Robert sighed heavily. "We're your parents." "Exactly," Emma replied. "That's why this hurts so much." He tried convincing her to withdraw the lawsuit, claiming everything could be resolved privately. Emma refused. Too many lies had already been hidden behind closed doors. The truth needed daylight. As the case progressed, investigators began examining financial records. What they discovered shocked even Emma. The money from the property sale had not simply helped Jason launch a business. It had funded multiple failed ventures, luxury vacations, expensive vehicles, home renovations, and countless personal expenses. Millions of dollars had disappeared over the years. Records showed that almost none of the proceeds had been preserved or invested responsibly. The inheritance William spent a lifetime building had been treated like an endless source of cash. Every new report deepened Emma's heartbreak. She wasn't angry about losing money. She was angry about the complete disregard for her grandfather's legacy. Court hearings began several months later. The first hearing was emotionally exhausting. Emma sat across the room from her parents while attorneys presented evidence. Diane avoided eye contact. Robert appeared confident at first, but that confidence faded as documents accumulated. Jason seemed increasingly nervous. During one session, handwriting experts testified regarding the signatures used during the sale. Their analysis revealed significant inconsistencies. Multiple experts concluded that the signature supposedly belonging to Emma showed signs of forgery. The courtroom became silent as the findings were explained. Emma watched her parents carefully. Neither looked surprised. That hurt almost as much as the forgery itself. Weeks later, another breakthrough occurred. A former employee from the development company agreed to testify. He revealed that concerns had been raised internally about the unusual speed of the transaction and questions surrounding authorization. At the time, those concerns were ignored because all necessary documents appeared complete. Now, under examination, those same documents looked highly suspicious. One witness after another began sharing information. Some relatives who had previously remained silent, finally, admitted they knew Emma had never intended to sell the property. Others confessed that they had questioned the transaction privately, but feared causing conflict within the family. The truth that had been buried for years slowly emerged piece by piece. Each testimony weakened the defense further. Outside the courtroom, public opinion shifted dramatically. Friends, neighbors, and community members who had known William expressed outrage after learning what happened. Many remembered how proudly he spoke about Emma. Several even provided statements describing William's intentions for the property. The case became less about money and more about honoring a man's final wishes. As months passed, Robert and Diane's confidence disappeared entirely. Their legal team struggled to explain the growing mountain of evidence. Financial records contradicted previous statements. Witness testimony exposed inconsistencies. The discovery of William's protected documents created legal complications that became impossible to ignore. Eventually, the judge ordered mediation discussions, hoping both sides might reach an agreement. During one meeting, Emma sat across from her parents in a private conference room. The atmosphere was painfully tense. Diane cried throughout much of the discussion. Robert looked older than Emma had ever seen him. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for them. Then she remembered the years of lies, the forged signature, the destroyed farmhouse, and her grandfather's broken trust. Sympathy faded quickly. "Why?" she finally asked. "I just want to understand why." Diane lowered her head, tears streamed down her face. "We thought we were helping the family." Emma shook her head. "You were helping Jason." No one argued. The silence confirmed it. Robert eventually admitted they believed Jason would create enormous success if given enough support. They convinced themselves that using Emma's inheritance was justified because the benefits would eventually help everyone. Instead, the money disappeared through failed ventures and reckless spending. Their decision was driven by favoritism, pride, and desperation. Hearing the truth brought Emma no satisfaction. It only reinforced how little they valued her rights. The mediation ended without agreement. The case returned to court. As the final hearings approached, Rebecca informed Emma that the evidence strongly favored her position. For the first time, victory seemed possible, yet Emma's emotions remained complicated. Winning would not restore the farmhouse. It would not erase years of betrayal. It would not repair the trust that had been shattered. Still, she knew she had to continue. She wasn't fighting solely for herself anymore. She was fighting for her grandfather's memory. On the evening before the final ruling, Emma visited the edge of the former property. The development was nearly complete now. Families lived in houses where fields once stretched toward the horizon. Standing there, she closed her eyes and imagined the old farmhouse. She remembered William's laughter, his stories, and the lessons he taught her. For the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. No matter what happened in court, she had honored his trust. She had refused to stay silent. She had chosen truth over fear. As she looked toward the setting sun, she thought about the sealed envelope and the final paper her grandfather left behind. That document had done more than strengthen her legal case. It had given her something even more valuable. It had reminded her that William believed in her until the very end. And now, with the truth finally exposed and justice within reach, Emma prepared for the final chapter of a battle that would change her life forever. The morning of the final court ruling arrived with a strange sense of calm. For months, Emma had lived under constant pressure. She had spent countless hours gathering evidence, attending hearings, listening to painful testimony, and reliving the betrayal again and again. Yet as she sat in her attorney's office preparing to leave for the courthouse, she felt something she had not experienced in a long time. She felt ready. No matter what happened that day, she knew she had done everything she could. She had honored her grandfather's wishes, defended the truth, and refused to allow fear to silence her. When she arrived at the courthouse, reporters, community members, and several relatives were already gathered outside. The case had attracted attention because it involved not only a valuable inheritance but also a heartbreaking family betrayal. Emma ignored the cameras and walked inside with her attorney, Rebecca. The courtroom was quieter than usual. Robert and Diane sat together on one side. They looked exhausted. The confidence they once carried had disappeared completely. Jason sat behind them with his head lowered. He looked nervous and uncomfortable. Emma took her seat and waited. When the judge finally entered the room, everyone stood. The silence that followed felt endless. Emma's heart pounded as the judge reviewed the findings. He summarized months of evidence, witness testimony, financial records, handwriting analysis, and the legal documents William had left behind. Every sentence reinforced the same conclusion. The property sale had violated the conditions established in William's estate plan. The authorization used to complete the transaction was invalid. Critical information had been concealed. The court found overwhelming evidence that Emma's rights as the beneficiary had been ignored. Then came the words Emma would never forget. The judge ruled in her favor. For a moment she simply sat there, unable to move. Tears filled her eyes as the reality settled in. Years of lies had finally been exposed. The truth had won. The judge ordered significant financial compensation, including the value of Emma's inheritance, lost earnings, legal damages, and other penalties associated with the fraudulent actions. Additional investigations regarding forged documents were also recommended. Gasps filled the courtroom. Several relatives began whispering among themselves. Robert closed his eyes and lowered his head. Diane quietly cried. Jason stared at the floor. Emma felt a mixture of relief, sadness, and disbelief. She had won, but victory did not feel the way she once imagined. There was no celebration inside her heart. There was only a deep awareness of everything that had been lost. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed forward with questions. Emma declined most interviews. She did not want attention. She did not want revenge in the way people expected. She simply wanted peace. Over the following weeks, the ruling became final. Financial assets were liquidated, settlements were processed, and legal obligations were enforced. The amount Emma eventually received was substantial. For the first time in her life, she possessed more money than she had ever imagined. Friends encouraged her to buy a luxury home, travel the world, or enjoy the wealth she had fought so hard to recover. Yet Emma found herself thinking about only one thing: her grandfather. She knew exactly how she wanted to use the money. Several months later, she purchased a large piece of land near the location where William's farmhouse once stood. The original property could not be restored because development had already transformed it forever. However, Emma wanted to create something that honored his memory. She hired architects, historians, and community planners. Together, they designed a beautiful community center inspired by the original farmhouse. The building included a library, educational programs, meeting spaces, gardens, and areas where families could gather. At the entrance stood a bronze statue of William holding a gardening tool and smiling warmly. Beneath the statue, a plaque read, "Dedicated to William Carter, who believed kindness is the greatest inheritance we can leave behind." The project took over a year to complete. During construction, Emma personally visited the site almost every day. She planted flowers similar to those she and her grandfather once grew together. She created scholarship programs for local students and established grants for small family farms struggling financially. The more she worked, the more she felt her pain transforming into purpose. The betrayal that once consumed her no longer controlled her life. Instead of allowing bitterness to define her future, she used the experience to create something meaningful. When the community center finally opened, hundreds of people attended the ceremony. Many had known William personally. Others knew only the story of what Emma had endured. During her speech, she spoke about gratitude, resilience, and the importance of honoring those who believe in us. She never mentioned revenge. She never criticized her parents. She simply shared the lessons her grandfather taught her about integrity and compassion. The audience gave her a standing ovation. For the first time since his death, she felt as though William would be proud. Meanwhile, life was very different for Robert, Diane, and Jason. The court ruling had severely damaged their reputation. Friends who once admired them now questioned their actions. Business associates distanced themselves. Many relationships disappeared entirely. Financial difficulties followed as they struggled to meet legal obligations. The lifestyle they once enjoyed quickly vanished. More painful than the financial loss was the growing realization of what their choices had cost them. They had not only lost money, they had lost Emma's trust. Months passed without meaningful contact. Emma focused on her work and the community center while her parents remained largely absent from her life. Then one afternoon she received an unexpected letter. It was from Diane. The handwriting immediately brought back memories of childhood birthday cards and family notes. For several minutes Emma simply stared at the envelope. Eventually she opened it. Inside was a heartfelt apology. Diane admitted that greed, fear, and favoritism had influenced their decisions. She acknowledged that they had repeatedly chosen Jason's needs over Emma's rights. Most importantly, she accepted responsibility without making excuses. The letter ended with a simple request. She hoped Emma would agree to meet one final time. Emma spent several days considering the request. Part of her wanted to ignore it. Another part remembered the years before the betrayal when her parents were simply mom and dad. Eventually she agreed to meet them. The meeting took place at a small park near the community center. When Emma arrived, she immediately noticed how much older her parents looked. The stress of the previous years had changed them. Diane's eyes filled with tears the moment she saw her daughter. Robert looked nervous in a way Emma had never seen before. Several minutes none of them spoke. Finally Diane broke the silence. "We're sorry," she whispered. Emma studied their faces carefully. For the first time since everything began, she saw genuine regret instead of defensiveness. Robert nodded slowly. "We made terrible choices." Emma listened quietly as they spoke. They admitted their mistakes, acknowledged their favoritism toward Jason, and accepted responsibility for the damage they caused. There were no excuses left, no justifications, only regret. When they finished, silence returned. Diane wiped away tears. "Can you ever forgive us?" she asked softly. Emma looked toward the nearby gardens surrounding the community center. She thought about the years of pain, the courtroom battles, and the memories of her grandfather. Then she looked back at her parents. "I forgive you," she said. Both of them immediately began crying, but before they could speak, Emma continued. "Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened." They nodded. "I know," Diane whispered. Emma took a deep breath. "I forgive you because I don't want to carry this anger forever, but things can't go back to the way they were." Robert lowered his head. He understood. The relationship might heal over time, but the trust they destroyed would never fully return. Surprisingly, Emma felt lighter after the conversation. Forgiveness was not about excusing their actions. It was about freeing herself from the burden of hatred. She no longer wanted her future tied to their mistakes. She wanted to move forward. As the years passed, the community center became one of the most respected places in the region. Thousands of families benefited from its programs. Scholarships helped students attend college. Community gardens provided fresh food. Educational workshops supported local farmers and small business owners. Every success reminded Emma of her grandfather's values. His legacy lived on in ways far greater than a piece of land ever could. One evening, several years after the court case ended, Emma walked alone through the center's gardens as the sun began setting. The sky glowed with shades of gold and orange. Flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Children's laughter echoed from a nearby playground. She stopped beside William's statue and smiled. So much had changed since the day she discovered the betrayal. Back then she felt powerless, heartbroken, and alone. Now she stood surrounded by evidence of everything she had built. The people who wronged her had expected her to stay silent. They expected her to accept the loss and move on. Instead, she found the courage to fight for the truth. More importantly, she refused to let bitterness shape her future. Looking around, Emma realized something important. The sweetest revenge had never been winning the lawsuit. It had never been exposing the lies or receiving compensation. The sweetest revenge was building a beautiful life despite the betrayal. It was honoring her grandfather's memory instead of allowing greed to destroy it. It was finding success without sacrificing kindness. As the final rays of sunlight touched the gardens, Emma placed her hand on the statue and quietly whispered, "I kept my promise, Grandpa." For a moment she imagined hearing his familiar laugh carried by the wind. A peaceful smile crossed her face. The pain of the past would always remain part of her story, but it no longer defined her. She had survived betrayal, uncovered the truth, and created something meaningful from the ruins. And in that moment, standing beneath the evening sky surrounded by the legacy of love she had chosen over hatred, Emma finally found the peace she had been searching for all along.